We have a couple of members from the OPB Grants Division. I am Jen Wade, the Grants Division Director, and we have with us Christy Fuss, a grant specialist, who will be walking you all through how to submit a payment request. We also have joining us today David Luker from RSM to walk you through some information on submission of infrastructure-related grants that you may have through OPB. And we also have John Osorio from Strelto. He works through our grant care system and in the portal, and he will provide some tips for submission and anything else that is related to, issues in the technical aspect of submitting. So the objectives that we're going to go over today, we're going to identify where to submit payment requests, identify what you will need to submit your request. We're going to walk you through the payment request template, identify examples of types of supporting documentation, and this will be non-inclusive, so we're just going to walk you through some samples that Christy has prepared for you all, and demonstrate how to upload the template and supporting documentation into the portal. And then we're going to discuss some of the nuances for infrastructure or the capital improvement projects that you may see that differ from our general grants, such as our GEAR funds, negative economic impact, the hospital grants, and some of our other public health programs as well. And then lastly, John's going to discuss some tips for using the Georgia Grants portal with you. Just at a high level, again, we're going to run through that submission process with you. Payment requests will be submitted through the Georgia Grants portal. And Christy's going to show you what that looks like and where to go. And this must include a payment request template. You cannot send anything without the payment request template. It will be kicked back to you. This can be found on the important documents section of our 4 grantees website listed here. You can also find it from our main page, opb.georgia.gov. If you click on the 4 grantees webpage to the right-hand side under the COVID-related funding opportunities. We're also, for the payment template, going to show you how it must be completed, and you have to submit that along with the required supporting documentation for each budget category for each of the payment requests that you make. And again, Christy will walk you through that. We ask that you please submit each request under the appropriate file type to ensure it's not returned for revision. And what we mean by that is if you have personnel requests, we ask that you submit them when you attach them under the personnel line for uploads, as well as if it, for example, supplies, equipment, etc. We ask that you do the respective file upload types there. To track your request, once you submit the request for payment, you can check that status by logging back into the portal. If you click under My Grants and select the Payment Request tab, you can actually track it by what we call a PA number. And each PA has an attached DEXP or direct expense number as well. And this will make a little bit more sense when Christy walks you through that. But we do get a lot of questions about tracking the request, and it will show the status of submitted, review in progress, if it's returned for revision back to the grantee, if it is decision in progress, it is at a secondary level, and then if it is approved, then that then shifts from a process of approved to payment in process, and then payment complete. For questions and assistance for any payment requests related to your submissions, of course, we have the resources that are on our 4 grantees webpage. All the documentation that you will need will be there. But for programmatic contacts, you can click on the link under the programmatic contacts, OPB contacts by grant program on that 4 grantees webpage. We will attach this slideshow as well, and you can click the link where it says it can be found here. For general questions related to grants, you can reach us at grants@opb.georgia.gov. And for the infrastructure grant questions, whether it be for submission or any of the procurement, you can reach RSM at georgiaarpa@rsmus.com. And I'm going to turn it over to Christy to walk you through the process.
All right, what I'm going to do is I am going to start with just an overview of what the payment request template is going to look like. And then we're going to go through, show you some supporting documentation examples, and then we're actually going to step through completing the template and uploading it. So when you go into the template, which I'll show you, it can be downloaded off of the OPB website, and we'll do that in a minute. You're going to open it up and you're going to have just general instructions. The instructions tab will start off with general instructions, and you do, it's like it said, this payment template has to be submitted in order for your payment request to be processed. So there's some more, just general information, making sure that the template is accurate. Supporting documentation can be easily traced to the template. There are a lot of locked cells in this template, and there's a reason for that. So we do not want it to be modified. So we've tried to make it as easy as we can for you to enter it without making any unnecessary changes. So you'll see here, you're going to have the total on this summary is going to have to agree with the amount requested on the DXP that Jen just mentioned. Also, just a note here on entering the data on each tab in order and with the appropriate reference. When we go to upload the supporting documentation, I'll talk about this a little bit more. If everything's in the same order, what you enter on this template is in the same order that the documentation is loaded, and we can easily, as reviewers, look at this, it is going to expedite the process, and that will get your money to you a little bit quicker. So now keep in mind, this is a general template. It's going to be used for all the programs that OPB is offering. So it's sort of general. So everything's not going to apply to everybody every time. So just keep that in mind as you go through. Also, everything in here should be in alignment with what your approved budget was. So keep that in mind as you go through. So I'm not going to read everything to you. You can read. So we've got each tab that you can see, payment request summary tab, and you can see that tab down here. We'll get to it in a minute. There's a description of what is on to go on that row, what the heading is, what information we are expecting to see on that. As you go down, you'll see the same thing for personnel and fringe. It tells you what the purpose of the tab is, what each column is, and what should go into those columns. Keep going through travel, operating, other. So we're going to go through each tab also in a minute. So after you get through, you look through the instructions, read through them, make sure you understand what you're doing. We also have a documentation guide. I should have had that at the top. And these are just some examples. This is not an all-inclusive list, but this is what we just sort of came up with as some examples for each category. Personnel, the description of what we're looking for, and what some of the examples are: timesheets, payroll reports, daily logs, if you've had to do some calculations for different things, including those. Please do note, if you are providing payroll records of any sort, please redact Social Security numbers. So we should not be able to see those, or just not include them in the report at all if possible. Same thing for fringe, very similar. Travel, you've got your examples, and then you go on through with operating and supplies and your other. So those are just examples of what we would expect to see for supporting documentation. So the first tab where actually you start submitting data is the summary. And this is the only part on this one that you have to fill out are rows 6 through 13. I think they're pretty self-explanatory: your program name, what your grant number is that would be in Grant Care, what your organization name is, the contact name of the person completing this, their title, their email, and their phone number. And then whatever your date range is that is in this payment request. Some people may be submitting them for the entire project. Some may submit them monthly, depending on your project and how you do this. We do ask that somebody fill in this attestation. That's just saying that you've reviewed that the formulas are okay and everything appears to be completed correctly and carrying forward correctly. We've tried to test this and tried to break it, but that doesn't mean we found every error in here. If you ever have any problems, feel free to reach out to me or the grants box, and we will figure out what's going on. We do need this completed for us to accept this template. Now, the amounts on this particular tab will come over from the individual tabs. And I'll show you that after we update. You will see where these zeros will be updated. It will have a total down here at the bottom, and that total will also show here on total amount requested. That is the amount that has to be put in as the DEXP into Grant Care when we get there. Okay, personnel and fringe. You're going to have a little description at the top of every tab to sort of help you out there. So, quick reference there. You can see all of the different headings that we've got on our form here: title, name, what the pay period is that you are reporting, the gross salaries, wages for the pay period, the employer paid fringe benefits. If the person, you have to put, if they're 100%, you'll put in 100% here. If they are 25%, 50%, whatever, this allocated wages, allocated fringe will calculate based on the data put in these cells. The total for this tab is at the, whoops, sorry, you can see you're not supposed to put anything there. There is the totals for the tab will be here at the top. There's also a place if you need to add any comments or justification, you can add those in column I. Also at the top of every tab, you have a link that will take you to the instructions. So if you click this personnel and fringe instructions, it will jump you back to the instructions for this particular tab. You go back and it's the same thing for your supporting documentation. Click on the supporting documentation and it's going to take you to the personnel and fringe examples on the supporting documentation. So if we move on to the travel expenses, see we've got a little box up here explaining what this one is for. Make sure if you have any trainings or conferences, they had to been pre-approved by OPB, and the agenda must be submitted to the specialist. You can see where we've got the links to the instructions in the guidance. Here you're going to be able to put in either employee name or a vendor name. And this is if an employee submits a travel reimbursement expense, then you're going to put in the employee name here. Whatever reference ID your organization uses to track that reference ID for that travel, enter that in the reference ID column. Whatever the date of the travel, if it's arranged, just put in the last date and that's fine. Purpose of the trip, just a brief explanation, and then the total cost of the trip. Now, when you put this cost in, the next thing is there's going to be times that an employee may submit travel that everything on their travel expense report cannot be charged to this grant. So if it is not all charged into the grant, then there's a drop down. You'd select no, you'd come in here to the grant amount requested column and you would enter the amount. If it is for the full amount, select yes, it's going to automatically move that amount over. So, and we'll go through this when we start doing some examples also. And then again, you have a place for comments and justifications in column I. Now, occasionally you might pay directly. You may pay a hotel directly for an employee. That's when you would put in the vendor name. Let's say you pay the Marriott for 3 employees to go to an event. You would put in the Marriott, what that invoice ID number is, the date, and the purpose of the trip cost. So that's why you can do that. One's going to show either an employee name or a vendor name for that particular tab. So again, the total is at the top, and that's going to transfer over to the payment request summary. And we do just ask, just look at these formulas, make sure it looks like everything's correct. And there's not an error with the formula. Okay, for operating expenses, you've got your little blurb at the top, your links to your instructions and your documentation guidance. On this tab, you're going to put in your vendor name, invoice number, or whatever reference ID number you have, the date of that invoice, and the total amount on that invoice. And we want the total amount put on there, whether the total amount is going to be a request for reimbursement or not. And I'll show you that in a minute. We do ask what procurement type it is. This is a drop down. So you're going to have micro is up to 50,000. Small is up to 250,000, whether it's a seal build, a proposal. Proposals can include requests for information, requests for code, or the RFP. Any type request will go under the proposal category for procurement type, or if it's a sole source or a sole brand. Then we need to know, was procurement required by 2 CFR, yes or no? If yes, we're going to need to have that procurement documentation, but we don't necessarily need you to submit it every single time if you're submitting multiple payments for that particular procurement. So if you have not submitted it before, select no and attach it to this payment request. If you have submitted it before, then just select yes and put which PA it was attached with so that we can go back and refer to that if we need to. Now, when you get over here, this is where we're going to let you pick the budget category. And what we realize is that there's sometimes you're going to get one invoice that has multiple budget categories on one invoice. So this is why we've set this up this way so that you can just put that on one line. So if you're paying XYZ an amount and they have included some equipment and there happens to be some supplies on there and then some labor, you can put these amounts here. And then it will total that's the amount that you're requesting. Now, if you put in an amount here that does not agree with the total for that invoice, in the previous column, it was column D, then there's going to show a variance in this column, column N, and then you will select if you had some items that were non-program related, then you would just in the drop down say yes. If you say no, then we will expect to see a comments or justification. You'll also see if you type in numbers and you go over the amount, then you're going to get an error there too, just to help you make sure that you have not keyed in numbers wrong. So, and then the last tab, and once again, you can see that the totals are at the top. And then the last tab is other. We are not going to expect to see a lot of other, but there will be some of the things that we thought we might see. I know some people in their budgets that I've looked at, they've put land and other. Some put it in a different category, but land has been there. Or if you've had to pay, you had to get additional office space, say, and you had to pay rent just to allow for social distancing, then that would be the type of expense that we would see on this other tab. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one because we just don't really expect to see it a lot, but it is there in case there is something that is not covered by the other budget categories. So now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to give you some examples of some different, like this is a payroll doc. This is some of the supporting documentation. This is actually one I'm going to use in a minute when we get ready to enter. This is a payroll report. We can see names. We've got an employee ID number, their department, the gross wages. You've got the employer amount paid for Medicare and Social Security, and the check date. So I'm just going to be using a couple of people that I've highlighted here.
Hey, Christy, the payment report's not showing.
Oh, are you still seeing the other?
Yeah, just a template.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let me switch what I'm sharing then. Okay. About that. Find the right one. Okay, here it is. Okay, now, there you go. I will make sure I switch every time I switch documents, I guess. Okay, so here we've got employee number, names, the gross wages, the employer portion, and the check date. These are some of the elements that we would expect to see on a payroll report. Now, let's see. Let me go to another example here. Sorry, I'm switching back and forth. This won't be so bad once we get into it, but right now I'm just needing to show you a few different things so that you sort of know what we would expect to see. Okay, here's a travel form, which was not what I was about to show next, but I will show it really quick. So this is travel for an employee. You've got the dates, you've got what the travel was for, where they're going. So that would be just an example of a travel report. I wanted to show you another payroll report though. I've got a couple of those. I just pulled the wrong thing up to the end now. Okay, okay, here is another pay register. So this would be a payroll report that came out of a system. You can see it's got the employee's name, check numbers, check dates, hours, earnings, the employee taxes, the employer portion. So that would be an example, another example of a payroll register. So you can see we've got a couple that we do that we have seen in Excel. And then we also have some that we have gotten in PDF. Either format is fine. It's just whatever your system provides, we will accept. We just need to make sure that it supports the amounts that you're requesting. So let me show you. There's one other. This was another Excel version of a file that we had. And this one shows, you know, we've got a column for pay date, we've got the employee names, the check numbers, the gross pay. Now this one does not show the benefits on this particular file, so you would have to run a different report if your system provides something like this to document your fringe. Now this one is sort of, what I do like about this one and why I'm showing it is a lot of times when we get an Excel file, we're having a hard time figuring out what's included. What are we seeing? This one shows the runtime settings. So it shows us what the date range was that was included, different departments, different information. So if you have that with your system, that is very helpful as when we start reviewing to be able to see that information. Now, what we would prefer is that you only provide the payroll for the individuals that you are submitting. If you are going to submit and have other employees, your whole list, then please highlight like I did in this example so that we can easily find them. Like I said, if you've got this Excel file, it would be pretty easy, I think, for you to delete the rows that we're not needing or hide them. But at least if you will highlight on a PDF or an Excel, that will make our review process a lot quicker, and we would really appreciate that. And if that helps you get your money a little bit quicker, I would think you would appreciate that too. So now let me go back to the travel. I had shown you one travel. Let's go and look at another form that another one that I'd be using in a minute. If I can find it. Where did it go? Okay, here we go. Okay, here's another travel form. I'm going to use this one in a minute in the example. Now, what I've done on this one, because I'm not going to be switching back and forth because you see how cumbersome it is to go back and forth, is on this particular travel, when I get ready to enter it, I'm not going to submit the entire travel. Only part of this travel submittal will be for the grant. So we've got in my business purpose, you can see ARPA conference, Savannah, regional budget meeting in Macon. And then I have the travel itself is broken down that way. So what I've done here is, so what it is the part that went to Macon, that's not part of the grant. So it's $59.40. What I did is I came down because, like I showed you a minute ago, we're going to put this total $886 on the form, but we're not going to include it all. So what I did was I used a comment that shows that I backed out the $59.40 and $827.28 is the amount I'm going to be requesting. Anytime you can make a comment like that on a form or the documentation to help us, to help the reviewer, we are really going to appreciate that. And we won't have to sit there and figure out, wait, why does this amount not agree? It's going to really help. Okay, a few invoices here that I'm going to be using. We've got invoice. Let me go back to the top of this one. This one, actually, we've got the purchase order. I don't know why it's trying to hang on here. So we've got a purchase order that shows us what they're doing. Ignore that date because I grabbed one that was an example. All these examples are not the best examples in the world, but they're on here. They were things that I was trying to find to help us. So we've got invoice. So we would want to highlight the invoice number, the invoice date. You've got your vendor here. On this one, the purchase order said equipment, but this is nothing's over $5,000. So it's really going to be supplies when I go to enter this in a minute. And I'm also going to have an amount that I am going to exclude from this total invoice. So even though the total down here is going to show 176,293.60, I am going to, I'm going to remove a section of that to show you a little bit more how the template works. Another invoice. Oh, I forgot that part of this one. Also, when you submit the invoice, you also need to submit proof of payment. So here is a copy of the check or anything that you've got, you know, whatever, if it's an ACH, copy of the ACH, that information is what we would expect to see. Excuse me. And I don't know, converting here. Okay, so we've got another invoice here, the check to show that that it was actually paid. You've got your invoice number, the date. This one's professional services for a date range and the amount. One last invoice has a purchase order, shows that it's buying equipment. Come down. The invoice doesn't actually say equipment, it just says materials, but based on the purchase order, we know that that was equipment. And then there is a copy of the check payment. Like I said, if it's an ACH, that's fine. Whatever proof of payment you have is what we are going to be looking for. So now I am going to transition to show you. We're going to download. I'm going to show you how to download the file. So if you go out to OPB's webpage, there is for grantees under our COVID response. And you scroll down and there are all sorts of great resources out here. Use them. Jan has done a fabulous job of keeping everything updated, and highly recommend going out here if you have any questions and looking there first, because you're probably going to be able to find it. But under this important documents and guides, click learn more. And you can see there's a lot of documents out here. Some of them you have already used and referenced. And here's the payment request. So you're going to want to click the payment request template and download it. And I'm guessing I've got to change my screen again. Okay. Let me share that screen because I'm guessing you're still seeing the other one. Okay.
Yep, I got your template now.
All right. Good. Okay, enable editing. Now I would go ahead, if this was me, I would go ahead and do a save as.
Hey, Chrissy, it just stopped sharing again. Sorry.
I did it. Oh, okay, sorry. Let's see. Get back to that screen. Okay. Okay, seeing it now?
I got it now.
All right. So I would go ahead and just do a save as. My computer will cooperate today. Being awfully slow. I would probably just create a folder for whatever you are submitting. That's just and that way everything's there together. I'm just going to save this one as a test. Okay, we've already talked about instructions and documentation guides. So let's go ahead and let's start filling this out. Okay, our program name is OPB. And this is, we don't really have one. This is just for these purposes. So, okay, and then our grant number. Whoops. Your grant number is going to start with a GA. That when you go in My Grants in the system, if you don't know what it is. So, okay, whoops. Wrong cell. All right, put in my name. Title. Email address. If I can type today. B. I'm not giving you my phone number. Okay, and we are going to, this is actually the one I'm going to do as an example. I've covered a large range, so it's basically going to be from the beginning of the grant to, I think my last date I put in here, I'm just going to say is the 30th. So this is all that's on this tab. Now we're going to move over to Personnel and Fringe. And that's that information that I had shown you earlier. Like I said, I'm not going to try to switch back and forth just because of the problems of sharing the screen. So what you're going to do is type in the employee's title. Specialist. And for this particular one, I'm actually doing 2 different pay periods. So I am going to my pay period is from August 1. And this you can type it in whatever format works best for you. August 15th to 2021. And for that pay period, he got paid. And his total benefits, 8.66, and 100% to the project. So you can see 100% of the wages and the fringes went columns there. Let's put in one more employee that is not 100%. Melissa, she's only going to be 50%. We're going to do the same period, so I'm just going to copy it down so you don't have to watch me type. Right, there is her gross salary, her benefits that the employer paid, and she's 50% to the project. So you can see we've got 50% calculated out. So you would just continue on this list. This is when you enter these names, please have them down in the same order that they are going to be on the documentation. This just helps us greatly, and it is really important. It doesn't seem like it would be a big deal, but it really is. So it really does help. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you here. So we look at this. Yep, looks like the totals are right. Now let's go over here to the payment request summary. And you can see there's now personnel and fringes. So that has been brought over here and the total is there. So that takes care of that. We're just going to do a couple of examples on everything. Okay, travel expenses. Got a couple of these for you. Same kind of thing. I'm just trying to give enough examples to sort of see how things work on this form. So we would put a reference ID and what the date was. On this particular one, I'm going to be using the approval date just because that was and this is the one I showed you a little while ago that there's going to be part of this that is not going to be included. So that I had the comment, it was the 886.68, but there was $59.40 that is not being requested. So I'm going to say no. And then I'm going to type in the amount that I'm actually requesting. You could come in here and you could explain why it's not being requested. But in this case, we just sort of know there was something on there. And the note was also on the actual documentation. So I'm not going to type in a comment on that. And you'll notice a lot of these I have put there are hints to sort of help you when you get to that cell. We tried to make it where, you know, filling out one was pretty much either intuitive or there was a little hint there to help you out. So let's do one more. This. The date on this one. And this one, we are going to include the entire amount. So we would say yes. And if you say yes, that amount automatically carries over to the grant amount requested column for you. So now I will go back up. I do want to show you something here. The total of this particular one up here was $886.68. Well, if I came out here, it should be less if I say no, but let's say I put in 870, whoops, not 872, 892.68. I fat fingered it. It's going to highlight in red. And what that's telling you is there's no way that number can be right. So it's just a thing, it's just sort of help us. The more checks and balances we have as we go, hopefully the less errors we'll have that somebody will catch as we go. Whoops, wrong cell. So let me fix that back. You see the red goes away. You've got the total here that's going to go to your payment request summary, the 159794. We can check. There it is. So our total has updated. We're ready to move on to our operating expenses. So we have a couple of examples here. So the first vendor, Howard Industries. Invoice number was the invoice date. This one is formatted. We do look for a date format for invoices, and I'm already typing it wrong. And 2021. The total amount, this was the one that I'm going to exclude some. The total amount of the invoice is actually 176. There was no procurement on this one because of the amount. It was the small, so we don't have to worry about any of the other procurement columns. And you can see right now that variance is showing red because I have not entered anything in our budget categories yet. So this entire invoice was for supplies, but all of the supplies are not eligible for this grant. So I've backed out $29,625, which left us with $136,668.60 to submit. So you can see it's still in red because I've submitted less. Now, this is also one of those situations where if you submit more, so let's say I go there and put in 200,000, now you got a negative. So we know we got a big problem there. So these, if it's highlighted in red, there's something you need to look at. That's sort of just a prompt. Something does not fitting what we expect it to be. Now this one is going to stay red just because we couldn't figure out how to make it be different. So on this one, you're going to answer this question: is this variance for non-program items on the invoice? And the answer is yes. If you say yes, it's automatically going to put this description in the comments for you that there are non-program items. That explains it. If you say no, then you need to explain why is there a variance, because we wouldn't expect there to be anything else. So that's one for that particular vendor. And we will get into how to upload all this documentation in a few minutes. So next example is with Nova, is the name of the vendor, and they're in 500. The date was March 30th of 2021. The amount is $11,475. Again, this one actually could be under a micro. Actually, in reality, I'm gonna go with that this one was, because this is just one invoice to Nova. So we're gonna say that they did have a contract that was for $500,000, and this is just one invoice off of that. So procurement was required, and then this is where if you say no, that it has not previously been submitted, then you need to attach all procurement documentation to this PA. If you have already submitted it, you would type in the PA that it was submitted. That way somebody can go back and double check it. This particular one is all going to be contracts. So that amount, everything agrees, no comments needed, everything's good. So that one's all good, we're good to go. All right, last one. Oh, it'd help if you can see what I'm doing, if I'd actually get in the right cell and start typing. Invoice number is 573. The date was June the 17th of 2021. The amount here is, the total amount of the invoice is $51,655. I'm just gonna go with small on this one, not worry about the procurement. Just make sure you're doing the procurement appropriately for what you're doing. Now this particular, I entered that in the wrong place. Okay, this particular invoice is partially for equipment, and then part of it was for the labor. The equipment portion of this one was $48,005. So that's going to go into the equipment category. The labor portion, we're going to put it over in the contracts consultant subaward category. So on this one, it's going to agree. For this, we are not going, when we get ready to upload the documentation in a minute, you're going to see that we have you put it by these budget categories. In this case, one invoice is supporting 2 budget categories. You can come out here and make a comment that the contracts portion, contracts documentation, bid with equipment. That way, everybody knows it's there, and that's just a good way for the reviewer to know there's not going to be a separate document for that. So you want to save this. We're also going to go over, and you can see in this particular, you've got the 3 categories that are totaling at the top: your equipment, your supplies, and then your contracts, consultant, subawards. So when you go over to your payment request summary, those amounts are now on here. So at this point, we are ready to do the attestation. We've checked our numbers. We put today's date. Best case scenario, I'll be honest, is somebody different than the person reviewing really should look over this form. That would be our recommendation. I'm going to put Jen's name on here just because she would be likely to be who was doing it if I was doing one. So it is saved. The template is ready to be uploaded along with our documents. So now I'm going to share another screen with you. So let's switch over and we're going to go in to our portal. Okay. This will be the Georgia Grants portal. You'll select My Grants. You scroll down. We're going to be using this grant GA0005898 for our purposes today, water, sewer, infrastructure. Select on your grant number. Now, I know Jen was mentioning earlier, you can see your payments. This is one place that you can see your payments and what the status is. There was also this payment request tab. You can look there and you can see the status of your payment request. So we need to do a new payment request. So you click the new payment request button. And then you're going to need, if you can use an existing project or you can create a new one. I am going to create a new one just to show you what that would look like. So I already have this one on the system. Make sure I have, let's see, treatment facility. Our project start date started March 3rd of 2021. So you can go and select that way. You can type in the date. It's going to end September 30th of 2026. Address. Okay, city, Atlanta, Fulton County, Georgia, and that's probably not a real zip code. Okay, project description, just a brief description of what this actual project is for. So, a great description, but it's something to put in. Doing a project, I would write a little bit better description for this, but that'll work. Now, right now, there are 2 more boxes that are currently not required: project justification and project outcome. These are going to be changed in GrantCare to actually coincide with what the treasurer reporting requirements are. And when that update is made, they will be required boxes there for you to have to fill in. But for now, I'm just gonna type in test. Those are not going to be what we're using. And then we're going to say add project. Okay, so I'm going to select that project and we're going to click this create payment request button. Okay, sorry, my computer's slow. Okay, now scroll down. We've got this. Here's your payment ID. It's automatically assigned by the system. So Jen mentioned DEXP, direct expenses. You don't actually enter at the payment ID. You go to the direct expense is where all of the information is going to be loaded and entered, and then that rolls up because you can have multiple DEXPs for any payment request. We're only going to do one today. So we are, in this case, I am going to go with my last date since I'm submitting a range of dates. I'm going to just go with November 30th as my last one, which is what I had put on the payment request template. So pick your category. We're doing infrastructure for this particular one. That's the only thing I have available to select. those will coincide with whatever your grant is that you are working with. So they will change and will be appropriate to your grants as you go through. And the same thing with the allowable activities, those will change as you go through. So we're just going to type in. Okay, what you're going to be doing, for these type things, we're going to be putting in one amount. So you're just going to say one, even though there are multiple things, it's one payment request, and we're going to put in the total for that payment request, which was 213,657.08. So that's going to be the amount. That amount entered in that cell must agree to the total amount requested on your payment template. So then you say add direct expense. And wait. Take a little bit, get a little bit of coffee, wait a little bit longer. Okay, so now here's where you get to start uploading these documents. And they have really done a good job of having these categories for you. So you can see the payment template. You've got to have the payment template, and if you do not have it, it will be kicked back to you. So this is where it's very easy. If you put everything in one folder, it's really easy to find it, and all you have to do is start clicking away. And you'll see this as I go through, it automatically is going to where I saved it. So you get your payment template. Okay, let me get down here. It's going to give a document name to this document. In the system, you go down, you have to select the sub document type, which in this, we only have one option. It is the payment template. Click upload. My internet is not the fastest. Okay, go to personnel. Same process. Click on the little document, go down, pick whichever appropriate payroll document there is. This is one, and I didn't mention this when I was filling it in. Let me go ahead while this is uploading. So then now you can see under subdocuments, we have a few different types. So what I have is a payroll report. So we're going to upload. You can upload the personnel and fringes. If it's the same document, you can upload it under both if you want to, or you can make a note like I did on the other expenses that I made a note that it was uploaded all under one category. You can make a note that fringes and personnel are in the personnel category, and that will be fine. Okay, we're going to go to travel. And here you've got the upload button. And we are going to pick, want to load them in the order that I entered them. So this is, you can, if you're uploading them individually, like I'm about to do, then load them in the order that you entered them. So it would be good to have them probably named. So we did, this was an itemized travel expense because it was a travel report. If it had been a vendor, then that would be an invoice or something else. And then we want to go get our other travel report. And we're going to upload it. See here, if it was something straight from, like I mentioned, the Marriott, you would select invoices, but this is a travel report that an employee submitted, so we want to enter that. Okay, so we've got our two travel reports. All right, we have one item that is for equipment that was over 5,000, and that was the one I was saying would be, it also had some other expenses, and that was the one I made the note that it would be loaded under the equipment on the payment template. So this is an invoice that we have. Upload it. it had the labor. So instead of coming down and putting it under the contracts and consultants and subawards and having it in two places, that's why I just made a reference on the template. Okay, and then we have 2 more invoices to upload. Wait. I think this is just so I have a chance to drink some more coffee. It's being slow for me.
And John just said it, it's a test environment since we're doing it this way. So that's why it's probably gonna be much faster for users than it is for us right now, just
Well,
demoing it.
And my internet is so slow. So that's another downside of me doing this. But let's see. Let me make sure I'm putting this one in the right place because I just, yeah, this one actually, I was about to put it in the wrong place. So that would not be good, as if for testing, I actually am loading things in the wrong place. Okay, so then we've got the Nova was for consulting. Oops. Okay, and this is an invoice, and we're going to upload. While that's uploading, you can probably see the grade behind. If you've uploaded the wrong document, you can delete it here. Maybe I picked too. I didn't think this was a big document, but maybe it was. You see it's automatically naming your documents, and it does have like a PR in front of it for payment requests. So the name of it does correlate to what type document it is. So we have uploaded every document. We have our template. You can see there's the template. We have documents under all the categories that we need. So scroll on down and we are going to save this direct expense. It takes you back to this payment request page. If you have another direct expense that you've done another template on, maybe you're doing them by month, but you have 2 months that you're doing at one time, or whatever you may have, you can enter another direct expense for this same payment ID. But we're not going to do that for today. You can also save it and come back to it and edit it later. You can see that we still have the DXP is in edit mode, and you could edit it, but we are going to go ahead and we are going to click submit for payment. Make sure you click the submit for payment, and when you do that, you can see that the direct expenses totaling this amount will be submitted. By submitting, I attest that this payment request is in accordance with the executed terms and conditions. You have to click submit for payment again for this to actually be submitted. If you don't click that, it's going to be sitting there waiting, and it will not get processed. It will not show up for us to review it. So we have done that. You can see I have amount requested, the payment date, that it is in submitted status, what the date was. Of course, it hasn't been approved yet, and you can view it if you need to. So I think that is all for payment request, and I am going to turn it back over to Jen. Did I miss anything, Jen?
Nope, I think that's all good. Great information.
Right.
And it'll become easier for them, once they get used to doing it the first time, first and second time, it'll get a lot faster for them. John, before I hand it over to David Luker, is there anything in the interim that you wanted to point out that Christy had gone through as far as the system goes in grant care? Or did you want to wait until after David goes?
John may be on mute.
We can't hear you, John. So I want to turn it over to David. David, I'll let you go ahead and work through the infrastructure.
Perfect.
Highlights, and then John will go afterwards.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. So we just wanted to highlight a few specific items that will largely relate to infrastructure projects that are primarily delivered through the use of engineering and construction firms. As Christy went through the payment request process, she explained how to input the data for contracts that you are seeking reimbursement, where you have made payments to contractors. One thing that we want to make sure, I know in the guidance, in the payment request template, there is a resource and a reference to the types of documents that we would be looking for to support those requests. But I just wanted to add a little bit or provide a little bit of context and explanation around the infrastructure project specifically, because as many of you know, or those of you who are in the engineering and construction industry will likely be familiar with, most projects of that type are invoiced through a traditional lead sheet that's supported by a schedule of values, which includes a breakdown of the different divisions and scopes of that contractor's work. And that schedule of values, which ties to your invoice lead sheet, obviously, should include the budgeted amount that the contractor has agreed to deliver the work for, the current payment amount that is being requested on the current invoice, as well as the completed and stored to date values, which is an accumulation of prior invoicing payment information from your old invoices. And then if retainage is being withheld, typically there's a column for retainage, as well as change orders and contingency usages, which also generally represent themselves as a column, a budget column in this schedule of values. So I think for most folks in the construction industry, as I explain this, you certainly know the type of schedule that I'm talking about. If not, and you have any questions about that schedule and about how your invoicing process aligns with that kind of traditional lead sheet to schedule of values approach, I know that we've provided a link to our Georgia ARPA at RSM US email address, so we're happy to field any questions about that. I would go on to explain that the schedule of values that is supporting our construction or our infrastructure invoices generally include components like general conditions and requirements, the costs of the work paid to subcontractors or self-performed by the contractor, as well as any insurances or fees that were outlined in the contract and being billed as a part of that invoice. As many in the construction industry know, those schedule of values in some instances do not provide a line-by-line accounting of the use of contingency funds that may have been incorporated into the contract. So if there is a single line item used to track the use of contingency, we would expect to see a contingency log supporting the invoice so that contingency log can be reviewed and then tied into the schedule of values. And that same concept is applied for change orders. If construction change orders have been approved and are not shown in an individual line-by-line capacity within the schedule of values, we would also expect a change order log to be attached to the contractor's invoice. If the contractor's contract is a cost reimbursable type of a contract, one of the more newer innovative type delivery models that's being used in the industry today, then we would also expect to see the supporting invoices, payroll registers, timesheets, and other type items, general conditions invoices, and those sort of things that support that contractor's full application package. I think the last thing that I'd like to highlight here, if we have construction contractors providing invoices on a regular basis, we want to see the schedules that are being provided by those contractors. In most construction contracts, I realize everybody's contracts will be different, but typically there is a requirement for the contractor to provide an updated schedule in submission with their monthly payment requests. Because construction schedules and delays are rampant in the industry today, we really are focused on obtaining those schedule updates and making sure that they are provided with each monthly or quarterly package, whichever methodology you use. So I hope that gives you some context as to what we'll be looking for in kind of inside of the contracts area, specifically for construction style contracts. And I appreciate, Jen, you and the team giving us the opportunity to explain a couple of these things. And I hope that this is helpful in improving the quality of the payment request packages that we get going forward. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, David. I think just like the audits, for infrastructure projects or, general projects that we have, like, again, with public health, nursing homes, assisted living, be it hospitals, et cetera, I think the most important thing, whether it's on the audit side or the payment request, is documentation, right? So that's super important. Thank you for going through all that. John,
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can now.
Excellent. All right.
Perfect.
Excellent. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened there with the microphone. A couple of items that I did want to review regarding the portal. The recommendation for the browser is Chrome. So typically the issues that we get in regards from technical or not being able to access the portal come down to two issues. One of them being the browser not being Chrome. And the second item that I wanted to point out is a VPN. If you are using a VPN to access the portal, the website, most of the time it'll work okay, but if you start seeing issues, it's related to a VPN, typically if you are using a Chrome browser, and that usually will take away some of the frustration that you may see. If you are using a VPN, the browser may pull up, but there may be some functionality or upload. Some items may not work correctly. So if you are doing those things, for the most part, you should run into no issues when trying to navigate the portal. And that's it, Jen.
Thank you so much. Again, I just wanted to point out the resources that we have available for you, again, on the website. And if you have any questions about the payment request template, the easiest way to reach us is to go to the grants@opb.georgia.gov. It is our general inbox, and we can triage any information that we get into that inbox to the program specialist that you need to get. But you can also find your exact program specialist for the program if you go to the For Grantees website that we mentioned earlier. We will also post this slide up so you have that information. But if you go to our main webpage, I think Christy showed you, there's a couple ways that you can navigate to that For Grantees webpage. And if you go to our website, www.opb.georgia.gov, on the very main page to the right of the governor's picture, there's a little box with COVID-19 funding opportunities, and a couple bullet points down there on that side is the For Grantees link. You can click right there, and on the right-hand side on the For Grantees webpage, you'll see an OPB program contacts list. Go ahead, John. You're going to add your email?
What I was going to say, we are in the process of continuously enhancing the portal. So we are working on having the program specialist there at the payment request. So their information will be available there as well pretty soon.
Correct. Yes, we have a lot of things in development right now that we're super excited about, and that is one of them. So again, fastest way, easiest way to reach us is grants@opb.georgia.gov. And we do have links for technical support for Grant Care as well, for Sharlto, that is a Grant Care system. Thank you guys so much, and we appreciate it.